do.
I
yeah.
do.
About.
It's been about a year.
All right, we're going to start,
Over
everyone.
a year.
Yes, I do remember.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Environment Committee of the City of Rehoboth Beach. It is Thursday, October 20th. I call this meeting to order at 10:31 a.m. I'm going to do a roll call. Miss Mary Peck,
Here.
Miss Nettie Green,
Here.
Mr. Charlie Garlow,
Present.
Mr. Joe Vesio,
Here?
and the chair is here. We have a quorum and can conduct.
Wait, one more in attendance.
Mr. Eric Seward.
And Eric Stewart is here. Sorry about that. We have a quorum and can conduct business today. We have sent out minutes for September 15th, 2022. Are there any comments, changes, corrections?
I move we approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the meeting held on September 15th, 2022. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. Correspondence, there's none embedded in the agenda, but I will say that the mayor and commissioners, I think the last count I had received 7, I would say mostly negative emails about the potential of agenda item B, instituting a gas-powered lawnscape equipment ban. So I'm just going to make that note for the record. And so I do want to say that the priority for this meeting is going to be to discuss the offshore wind farm and the special meeting that was held on September 27th, and provide any feedback, recommendations that this committee may have to the mayor and commissioners. I do suspect that the mayor is going to want to potentially adopt a position statement that the city has on offshore wind, so that as there are public hearings and other opportunities for us to voice our position as a city, concerns that we may have, or the opposite, encouraging the project, that we're able to do so with a unified collective voice. So I think ultimately that's what will happen. So keep that in mind as we're thinking about whether this committee has recommendations to the mayor and commissioners. So with that, I will kick it off with agenda item A, and discussing that that meeting that was held on the September 27th. We had, I found it very informative. There was a lot of information that I didn't know that came out of that meeting. And we are, I think, the only municipality that has had BOEM in attendance. And the fact that we had BOEM and DENREC, who has been completely silent on the issue of offshore wind, I think it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, well done, Ed.
Thank you. We have good
Yeah.
representation from both sides as
We,
well.
we did,
A
yeah.
cordial exchange of opinions. That was good. And facts.
So I'll open it up. Go ahead, start us off,
I'd
Charlie.
be glad to talk about this. I've been thinking about it for quite a while in my own personal private life. I'm an environmentalist. I'm a member of several environmental groups. And it's been hotly contested. I've been to several of the meetings at which these same parties, the wind developers and anybody else who has a thought on the topic as well, has been coming to the Chamber of Commerce meeting that was held in the Forgotten Mile, and I've been able to attend those. So there's a lot of information that's been made available. In my opinion, the facts and the opinions, I think, are overwhelmingly in favor of promoting wind power as a clean, renewable source of energy for Delaware and indeed the East Coast. There was a study prepared by the SIOW, the Special Initiative on Offshore Wind, an acronym there that's not easy to remember, headed up by Dr. Willett Kempton from the University of Delaware. And their conclusion was that the best way to do so, if we want to have a offshore wind farm in Delaware, that we should have an auction like they have done in Massachusetts and some other states up and down the coast from Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, almost all the states from Maine to Georgia are getting in on harvesting some of the excellent wind resource that we have off our coast. So it's a great resource of clean energy. The price could be very well in keeping with all the other prices that we're paying for electricity. It created a lot of jobs to the extent that Delaware may in the future build even more wind turbines to harvest more of that good clean energy. There could be excess electricity, more than satisfying the needs of the state of Delaware. We could sell some of it by exporting it to like an export crop of agricultural products. We could be exporting and making money for the state of Delaware by continuing to promote offshore wind. I think the only two that were discussed at the meeting with on September 27 were the U.S. Wind and Ørsted, which have been proposing to build off the coast of Fenwick Island and Ocean City, and not a more extensive discussion of other sorts of projects that might be adopted if we were to go that way. The opponents of the wind farm included the mayor and engineer from the city of Ocean City, Maryland, and they objected to the presence of those wind farms so close to the coast. They said they'd be fine if it was only farther away, like 30 miles out, and that way it wouldn't be so visible. They're concerned about the visible impact on the horizon, and they think that it may impact on the tourism trade and property values and such as that. I don't want to go on too long because I know there's a lot of other folks here who might want to share their thoughts and opinions, but there was evidence presented that in Block Island, Rhode Island, where they have our nation's first offshore wind turbines, the number of people who came to the island to recreate and stay at Airbnbs and other things like that went up. So it was really a tourism draw in their conclusion that wind turbines do not scare away, if you will, tourists and others from coming to the beach, but rather they could very well be an attraction that would encourage folks to come and see these new, interesting, futuristic technologies. I think I'll stop there and let other people have a chance to reflect on their opinions. Commissioner?
I
Well,
think, go ahead, Mary.
I think that, you know, the University of Delaware report was more economics they were analyzing, and that, yes, wind power is now competitive with other types of energy, and the objections mostly seem to center around the viewscape and and also the impact on marine life and the ocean, and so so it would be better if they were further offshore in terms of the viewscape, but Ørsted already has permits to develop where they are, and I don't think that, I don't know whether it's reasonable to expect that we can ask them to move it further out or not, but as far as the impact on the ocean, that's something I'm very concerned about, and I did hear a presentation by the National Wildlife Federation on this point, which was really helpful to me, which was that they support offshore wind only because of the existential threat of climate change and what it will do, but otherwise they consider it a very difficult call and that's the only reason to support it, because there's the right whale, which is almost extinct, that is in these waters, and a lot of other concerns, but they feel that I guess they hope that the regulatory agencies will do everything to mitigate and study these impacts and make sure that they're done in the least harmful way. So I think that people are right to have concerns, but the overriding concern is climate change, and I guess the only way to really scale up clean energy to the extent we need to is to have offshore wind. So, yeah, I feel a little sad that that's what it's come down to with our oceans, but you know, we do have a climate emergency, and you know, we can't ignore that.
So I think that, I think the net result of the meeting was kind of a draw. I think that for every point, there was a counterpoint, and I think that that's a testament to having everybody available to discuss all points of view from, on the subject. So I think my concern is also, you know, the aesthetic value and, you know, the fact that all of our coastal communities rely on tourism. I don't know that people won't come here because there are windmills out in the ocean. What I was surprised about was the size of the structures and the fact that they are, you know, going to be larger than the Washington Monument, larger than the Eiffel Tower, you know, double the size of the Eiffel Tower, if I'm not mistaken, if not larger. So, and I didn't get a good feel for what the horizon view would be. I think that Orsted presented a pretty picture of little dots out on the horizon. I'm not sure that's what's going to happen in reality. The night view I thought was a little disturbing also, with all the little lights out on the horizon. But I'm with Mary as far as we may have no choice at this point. This is, you know, what it's come down to as far as climate change. But I also think that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We can do offshore wind, we can do solar power. I liked the presentation that the gentleman gave us, and I forget who it was, where he proposed taking farmland that is now being taken up with development of subdivisions and using that for solar farms, because that's, I think that's a practical solution to farmers that are struggling to maintain their land, struggling to make a living. That could be an alternate solution also. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
I wish I could have been here. But I agree with both Joe and Mary. But I feel that anything.
Nettie, I need you to sit closer to the
Okay, I
microphone.
think anything that we begin that is new is going to have its upsides and downsides. And I think the whole discussion of bringing forth the positives and the negatives, the sad things and the good things, I think it's going to be with any new thing that we do, that we have to do.
Yeah, I didn't attend the meeting as well, but I did read a little bit about it when I was doing some other research in the Ocean City page. And, you know, I agree, it is the way that we need to go for clean energy. But so let's agree upon that. And then what it looks like Ocean City did is then they fought to have them put farther out. You know, they wanted them here. So I feel that that's where we're at. Okay, it's coming, but there's no reason why that we can't ask to be, you know, or push in that way, because it is where we're going to go. But I think our negotiating power is like as my understanding, the Ocean City lobbied against that and had those put out. Also, I was amazed at the sizes of they showed the sizes of the Eiffel Tower, and is there that much more power that's generated from the big guys versus the little guys? I don't know. You know, they showed the sizes of some were the size of cruise ships, which, okay, was the first one. But yeah, so I don't know enough about that, but that's where I feel that our as a team here can push and fight. You know, it's going to happen, but that's just.
But I also think what you brought up, Joe, about maybe having these in some farmland where you can still farm and have wind turbines that maybe aren't so big and give energy too. So, which would also deal with the problem that we have of overdevelopment. So,
I think, Nettie, to that point, and I think a few of them have stated, it's just not economical. There isn't enough wind force inland here for that to be
I think Nettie was
economically
talking
feasible.
about solar instead of.
Oh, solar.
Okay.
Instead of wind,
oh, okay.
right?
Yeah, you
Is that what you're
Yeah,
talking about?
yeah.
One thing that I will say, and I think this is the U.S. Wind project out here, and what all the dots you see, so this area is the lease area, and the dots are where the wind turbines are going, and this is phase one. So they do have the potential to build in this area too, in a phase two, which obviously would be much closer to the shore. This turbine here is 15 miles from Fenwick, 17 miles from Bethany Beach. But if they go to phase two and were able to build out to this lease area line, much closer to the shore than 15 miles. So I think one of the opportunities is once the cut plan has been, after the review period and it's opened up for public comment again, is don't let them go to phase two. You know, make sure that 15 miles out is the nearest turbine. And I know that's one thing that Ocean City will advocate for, because they can put conditions, BOEM that is, can put conditions on ultimately how they're constructed. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think that's one area where a position can be taken.
If I could respond to the fact that these are tall structures, it's true, they're tall. On the other hand, they're so far off the coast, 15 miles, that's a pretty long distance. Most of the structure is beyond the curve of the earth. So you're not really seeing all of that height out there. The suggestion, I think, was made that if you hold a dime at arm's length, that's about how much you'll see of the top portion of the turbine. You don't see the whole thing. Whereas, if you'll go take a walk on the beach anytime, like my wife and I do, you'll see lots of big, ugly, rusty cargo vessels, which are much bigger than a dime at hand's length, and they're ugly, if you ask me, much more ugly than the graceful white turbine blades that look a bit like a sailboat, operate on the same physical principles. So I'd be glad to see even more turbines because they are so lovely. I mean, we've got ugly things all over the beach. Look at the airplanes that roar along saying, with dragging an advertisement behind them saying, you know, get 40% off on your martinis. That to me is ugly, and it hasn't driven away tourists. It hasn't reduced the value of the property here. If anything, the property values have gone up in spite of those, if you will, ugly things. And the reason it hasn't, I think, is because people just ignore them. It's part of going to the beach. And having these wind turbines out there on the horizon is going to be the same sort of thing. When it comes to lights, just 2 nights ago, my wife and I were out there walking. There are all these lights out there already. What are they? They're vessels. They're ships. They got red lights, white, flashing all over the place. But we don't sell our house and move out of town because of that. That's just something fun to look at. If you look out in the night sky and you see nothing, that's not particularly interesting. But if you've got a few lights to look at, you can count how many ships have we got. We got 6. All right, you know, that's better than last night. It's part of the beach experience is to see things on the water and to enjoy everything that's there. And if you don't like the beach because somebody has said something rude to you at the beach, you can move your towel down a little ways. You can accommodate to whatever concerns people might have, so that I see the wind turbines as being an addition. To having them there is not going to ruin the horizon. The horizon is just a little blue line between the light blue and the dark blue. people don't stare at the horizon for any more than about 5 seconds before they want to turn and look at what they really came to see at the beach. The waves, the dolphins, their grandkids, the sand castles that are being built. That's what attracts people to the beach, and lots of other stuff. Fudge factories, putt-putt golf, all the great stuff we have here that attracts people to the beach is still going to be there, and it's still going to be a wonderful place to come with our families.
I think, the meeting was well attended, and I thought I saw a lot of written comments coming in. Ed, was that correct? People were handing you
A
cards?
lot of questions, yeah.
So are those going to be available for us to see, or are they being, collected and recorded anywhere?
So they've been collected. I think a good number of the questions were asked in that public meeting.
Okay.
We have not yet determined how best to get answers to the other questions, I guess, in a fair way. But when we do, we will publish those in some way. Let me make a note to follow up on that.
One thing about the view, and I think that there's never been windmills as big as these anywhere, so we don't have anything to compare to, but, they're going to be as big as the biggest skyscrapers in New York City, and I know when this is not scientific at all, but when you're going up the New Jersey Turnpike and you're like 20 miles away, you can see New York City. So I kind of feel like you're definitely going to be able to see them, whether people are bothered by that or not, is subjective. But I think we have to admit that at least the Orsted project, as currently proposed, will be quite visible.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody who said you can't see them. They're visible. It's just a matter of whether or not that's how visible. Most of it's hidden behind the horizon, and/or is it something so ugly that it would offend you? Apparently it offends some, but not others. And so that's a factor, sightliness versus the other side, which is saving the earth from global warming. It's a pretty easy choice, in my opinion. One thing that encouraged me about the impact on the ocean was that they mentioned that the pylons, which go down into the water all the way to the ocean floor, are like a reef. They attract mussels and other sea creatures to them, and then other fish will come there because the mussels are there. So it actually adds to recreational fishing. It adds to the total quantity of fish in the sea so that the whales will have more fish for them to eat. So I think this is beneficial for all sorts of sea creatures.
I think that's kind of a draw, but, because I think there will be creatures like the right whale that maybe, the white whale?
The right whale.
Right whale, that become extinct and maybe better for some, but as with all of nature, I think nature adapts and evolves. So,
As to the
think
right
that's a
whales,
good
I think
idea.
the commenter suggested that the developers doing whatever they can to hear out people from the National Wildlife Federation and others to see what can be done. Some of the things they proposed was to not be pounding in the pylons into the floor bed when whales are within a certain distance of that. So they'll just shut down the operation until those whales go by so that they wouldn't be affected by the noise from the construction. And the other was to have a bubble curtain built around the outside of the construction, which would help to absorb some of the sound and benefit the whales.
Are there any specific concerns that any of us have about either of the two proposed projects?
The ones that are already pretty close to.
Yeah.
Can you show where the Orsted project is going? How close is it to the other one?
The Orsted project is actually closer to Rehoboth.
It's a little further south.
A little further below the US, I didn't even know about the US wind one. Okay, and there's the Orsted.
Those are the only two that are on the discussion list right now, I'd guess. But BOEM has indicated they're going to be putting out for auction other leased areas like those, but probably farther out, which would be,
Yeah, all of the call areas that would be considered are all east of the current projects. So definitely much further out.
and although it's farther out, and that means you're gonna have to extend the cables farther, that's gonna cost money for all that cable that you're gonna put out farther out. The wind is stronger as you get farther away from the shore, so that'll mean more productive energy. So it's sort of a balance between the economics of being farther out, better wind, but also the expense of the cable.
Also, I wonder whether, in terms of the marine life, which is better for them, closer to shore, maybe, I don't know, or out further? I haven't heard that answered, but Ørsted is, apparently, they're about to go through the environmental impact review. That hasn't really been complete for them yet.
So just for clarity, the Ørsted is north of the US wind.
Correct.
Okay.
Just so you know, if the New Jersey folks continue with their efforts at wind farms, and New York, and Connecticut, and Massachusetts, the rest of them, will be basically joining our other sister states in this process. So it's not as if people would be leaving the beaches in Delaware to go to someplace else. All the other someplace elses will have wind turbines too, so it's not like tourists who don't like wind turbines would have someplace else they could go other than Delaware.
So I don't think they show it on here, but so this is the Maryland part of the project. There's a New Jersey part of this skipjack program that is going to go in this area here. So one of the things you mentioned, Charlie, is the SIOW. What does that stand for again?
The Special Initiative on Offshore Wind, it's a funded by, not funded by wind industry or anybody like it. It's funded by foundations. I think it's the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, funded that study.
So that was more on the economics of it, and I think what came from that study is that Delaware should go out there and try to bid on some of these new call areas and build our own wind farm.
That would be in addition to the ones that have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
identified here.
So both of the Ørsted or the Skipjack and the U.S. Wind Project are paid for by Maryland ratepayers. But they will connect to the grid in southern Delaware.
And the theory of the SIOW study was that if you build a sufficient number of these wind turbines or wind farms, the price goes down. It's like cheaper by the dozen making cookies. And so if you just build a smaller amount, then the price would be higher. If you build a larger amount, then the price would be lower. And the price of wind and solar has been going down, down, down the last decade or more. So one can anticipate that in the future, they'll probably be improving the technology and getting even lower rates for ratepayers in Delaware if these plans go forward.
Any other concerns? This is, I guess it's going to be difficult to, I think, or if we want to provide some feedback to the mayor and commissioners, how to best do that and what we want to focus on.
Are you going to have, still planning to have like a public hearing where people are allowed to make comments or feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mayor wanted to give this committee and the Beach and Boardwalk Committee an opportunity to provide feedback, and then the mayor and commissioners will start their discussion on this, at which time public feedback will be welcome. But I suspect that most people are going to say, we love wind farm, we want them to happen, but we don't want to see them on the beach. I suspect that's what most people are going to say.
I don't know that there's studies on that topic, but as you can tell from the Rhode Island situation, people are not turned off by them. In fact, they're attracted by them. So, I mean, if you ask me, they're like giant, graceful Tai Chi as they're slowly turning in the wind. You know, they look like a sailboat. I like sailing. I'm a sailor myself. I'd like to see more of them, you know.
Does the commission want a recommendation from us? It seems like we see both sides.
Yeah.
But that we're pretty much for having this happen. So, I mean, do they want a recommendation, or what does the commission want?
I think the mayor would love a recommendation.
Would you
Or
entertain?
some feedback from us. And it may be that, you know, because of climate change and the threat, that we support the wind farms no matter how close they are to the shore, or
Well, at the
or-
distance
or
that's been
something else.
proposed, yeah. Well, would you entertain a motion to that effect? If so, I could make a motion to, that this committee recommends that the mayor and commissioners take a position in favor of wind turbines with caveats to make sure that environmental impacts or visual impacts are minimized. Is that vague enough?
I think that's what we all said. You know, it seems to be the common theme here with the team, so.
Say that again, Charlie?
Our committee recommends to the mayor and commissioners that we take a position, that Rehoboth Beach take a position in favor of the wind farms with the caveat that steps should be taken to minimize any environmental or visual impacts.
Right. And the impact statements are, you know, we review those, that they do, you know, for wildlife, you know, so to see. Make recommendations on the impacts, the environmental impacts that are done on that, as well as, you know, the project.
Second?
I second.
Yeah.
So we have a motion by Charlie Garlow, a second by Eric Seward, that this committee recommends to the mayor and commissioners that we take a position in favor of offshore wind farms with the caveat that steps are taken to minimize the environmental and visual impact. Is that
Perfect.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And the motion carries. That was easy enough. Is there anything specific, any very specific concerns that if we are able to articulate to DENREC or the state, that should be addressed? I think we learned, at least I learned, I was not aware that the state and DENREC had so much control over the process, and with the ability to, I guess, voice concerns or even stop the project. I thought all of that lied with BOEM, but I don't think we've ever had a state challenge BOEM's approval. So that would be interesting to see if any state ever took a contrary stance.
Well, you should know that the city of Ocean City, their mayor, and others in Ocean City have objected to this in earlier hearings. This has been going on for several years. I remember going down to Berlin, Maryland for one of the hearings they held, and the mayor was there and testified against them and wanted them moved out 30 miles, and I was there to testify in favor of them, and others were as well. So those who were opposed, like the mayor of Ocean City, have had a chance to push back. BOEM was there for those hearings. They've made their recommendations that it'd be 30 miles out. BOEM took their concerns into consideration and then made their decision. Somebody has to make a decision eventually,
Yeah.
after having heard from the pros and the cons.
I think it's telling that as a commissioner of Rehoboth Beach, that you did not know the state had a role. And I think that the comment I would have is that we should try to make sure the state keeps the coastal towns included in whatever their role is, and be a little bit more forthcoming with local government, because, you know, the whole sort of public relations fiasco when the state had a memorandum of understanding to put the cables in Fenwick Island State Park probably could have been avoided if the state had been a little bit more involved with the local communities. And so that would be my one thing. If, you know, I would ask the mayor to try to make sure the state does a better job in working with the communities.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. And it was a challenge just to get them, a commitment for them to come here. And I certainly was aware that they had some control over, obviously, all of the proposed cable lines coming ashore were in southern Delaware, and certainly knew that they would have control over that process, but had no idea about the Coastal Zone Management Act, and the Outer Continental Shelf, and that the state has control over all of that. No idea. I had no idea. So I found that part fascinating, and the fact that I didn't know it beforehand was concerning.
Yeah, and I think their response to questions about that was that it's available on their website, but, you know, where do you even find it on the website? So, yeah, it would be good if there was some kind of notification or alert system that they could give to coastal communities.
Well, you should know that they have been doing outreach through various outlets like the Chamber of Commerce for Rehoboth and Dewey, sponsored not 3 weeks ago, a presentation on this very topic with the pros and the cons there, and all those folks who are members of the Chamber of Commerce were there to hear them. They've done outreach to civic organizations of other kinds as well.
Was Denrec there?
They were not at the Chamber of Commerce.
I don't think they were. You're right, Edward.
I think the meeting we had on September 27th was the first time that I've ever heard or seen them involved in anything.
I suspect, and I don't know, but I suspect part of it is the state really doesn't know what its position is on the offshore wind. They haven't really pursued it, or, you know, said that the state is committed to it in any way. So, but even so, they still have a role, and they probably should be a little bit more out there with the communities.
And they may not know what their position is,
I
which is maybe
suspect-
why they've been silent.
Yeah.
That's fair. But so one comment I have is to make sure that the state engages with the coastal communities more and keeps us informed. Anything else to note?
I think it works both ways. I think they're waiting to hear from the coastal communities too, because we're the ones most involved. So maybe that's their plan.
Yeah. And in fairness, the BOEM only deemed the U.S. wind construction and operations plan. It was not until late June that was considered complete enough for review, which then made it public, and at that point sent to DENREC, as well as made public for everyone. So it has not been that long ago that that document has been made public, and it's a few thousand-page document. It's very comprehensive.
I was just doing a quick website search here on BOEM and public hearings, and they've got pages here of press releases, notices to stakeholders. Looks like somebody in their public relations shop has been doing a lot of effort to get the word out. I know that we're all buried by information from other various sources, but I find it difficult to fault Boehm for not reaching out enough, because it looks like they've been reaching out a lot, but no one could object to your suggestion. If they reach out more, that would be good.
Are you referring to Boehm now versus Denrec?
Yes, this is Boehm. I'm searching for Boehm and public
Yeah,
relations.
well, I was just saying I thought the state should do more, not Boehm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do better to inform the public?
I think the forum we held on September 27 was a terrific outreach. We could do it again in another 6 or 8 months or something like that to see what new developments have arisen.
But when the city reaches a position on what we want to do, I think that's a good time then to present it to the public.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else on this topic, or do we want to move on?
Fun.
There's a lot we need to do.
So let me ask if there's any comments from the public. Okay. Sure. Thank you, Anne.
So my comment is that this has been a great discussion. I totally agree with what Mary said. I don't think we have a choice any longer. I think we are at a point where climate change, we have to make some decisions. I also am a volunteer for MARE. I know that they're very concerned about the mammals. They are trying to train some of their volunteers to sit on the boats to be observant of the mammals that are coming through. So I think that there are a lot of issues that everybody's trying to resolve. The one thing that I would like to say in defense of human beings is that I think we have the ability to look, even though this is so friggin' complicated, to look at it in a way where minimal damage, that everybody can be okay with the outcome. May mean that some mammals die. I do think that's going to happen. It may mean that the vision is changed a little bit, but somehow we can, as humans, convince other humans that if we don't do something soon, we're in deep doo-doo. And I think what happened in Florida is a great example. Climate change is here, and as an environment committee, I think that is our focus, is how we can educate people about the real dangers of climate change. So, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I didn't give an update earlier. On Friday or tomorrow at our commissioners' meeting, we will be voting to have Catherine rejoin this committee, as well as Carolyn Diefendor, who has been here in the public and pretty active. So we'll have a full complement up here again. Any other comments? If not, we'll move on to discussion related to gas-powered landscape equipment. Charlie, can I ask you to give us a brief overview of where we've been and where we are now?
Okay, and I'll count on Mary to help out, because
Yes,
she's been
please.
a leader on this topic as well. We've had a number of complaints from citizens in Rehoboth about the noise from leaf blowers and other gasoline-powered lawn equipment. We've had representatives of the lawn keeping companies that come around to do the lawn mowing for a lot of people who don't want to do their own lawn mowing or lawn care in general. They seem to be relatively okay with the idea that we are moving in the same direction as the city of Lewis, which has already adopted a similar proposal to phase out and eventually ban gas-powered lawnmowers because of their noise and the smell and the fumes, the global warming as well from those pieces of equipment. They suggested that there's a lot of equipment available. We can certainly make an exception in our rule if need be to say where equipment isn't available, that we could postpone the deadline for that until such time as the technology improves or is more available So I think that's where we were. We're trying to figure out when the compliance date would be for commercial operations as opposed to residential operations. Mary, do you want to
Yeah.
add to that?
I just watched the recording of the meeting, and it seemed to me that committee was in agreement that we would propose something to ban the equipment, and that the committee was in agreement that we would have 3 categories of compliance deadlines. The people who have contracts with the city would have to come first. The commercial operators that are doing private business would come second, and homeowners would come third. And that people weren't comfortable with adopting the exact language that Lewis had used, that they found it somewhat confusing. And that, I guess Charlie and I didn't realize it until I watched this yesterday, but we were tasked with proposing some language. And so I will be willing to do that, but what I want to get a sense from the committee, if that's what we want, to have these three tiers, and also do we want to break out the different kinds of equipment or have exceptions or anything like that? It looks like from everything we've heard from landscapers and so forth, that the big companies don't have a problem with any of it, except they did say the large chainsaws for large trees, they still feel like they need to use gas-powered chainsaws, but otherwise they were okay with it. And some people were concerned about the smaller companies and the expense and so forth, but I want to point out that, you know, we're just, most of the people that work here, they probably work in other places as well, and it's not like if they have to get electric equipment for here, they might still be able to use their other equipment until it has to be replaced. But the other thing that the landscapers did point out, which I thought was interesting, is that they do have to replace their equipment fairly regularly anyhow. So it's not like, you know, their gas-powered equipment was going to be used for 20 years. So, but anyhow, and so I'm willing to work on that, but I just want to get a little bit more clarity as far as do we want different equipment to be phased out at different times, or should we just say all gas-powered equipment on these deadlines and, you know, just get a little more structure. But I did see, I don't know, I don't think there was a vote at the last meetings of the committee as to exactly what they want, but what you all want. But it seemed to me that there was a consensus that we should do something.
Yeah, we did not vote. I think there was consensus that all handheld equipment and push mowers would be first. That any chainsaws greater than 14 inches or riding mowers, the technology is just not there yet to have that phased in at this point. And the 3 categories of the city, contractors and residents, would be different dates. And I think you covered everything else from the last meeting. One concern that I've heard from a lot of residents is they just don't want to buy new equipment, whether it's next year or 3 years. They don't want to be forced to do that. And one of the other concern I've heard is some of the smaller landscape equipment, there's fears that they will just not service Rehoboth anymore. So I think some residents are fearful that they're going to lose their contractors. So we did hear from a few landscape companies. I think they were mostly larger, and they seemed to be amenable with what the committee's recommendations. But I don't think we've heard from a lot of the the mom and pop landscapers. So if we have any other comments, or I'd like to open it up to the public, and then we can kind of go from there. Any comments from the public? If you could just come up and state your name in relationship to the city.
We're going to get a knee replacement next week, so if you don't mind, I'm going to sit down.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Do I need this, or can you hear me?
No, you need the microphone.
Well, even if you could just come up here and use this one.
Sit right here?
Yeah, that would be fine too. Again, just
Can
state
you
your
hear
name
me?
in relationship to the city.
Barb and Bill Hara, 900 and 902 King Charles. And I keep throwing 902 with King Charles out there because it's an open lot. It's 5,000 square feet of beautiful grass. We cut our own lawn. And I have statistics for you. This is nothing subjective. This is objective. We use exactly 8 gallons of gasoline per season. 2 of those gallons are mixed. 6 of those gallons are regular gasoline. Is that indeed contributing to climate change? Do you all have any facts, figures from the EPA that can categorically tell me that 8 gallons of gasoline over a 6 or 7 month period is contributing more to climate change than the traffic on Rehoboth Avenue, the cars that sit and idle on a Saturday night waiting for a parking space? Do you have any objective figures to prove that? No. Okay.
Is there any response to that?
Yeah, sure, we've got responses to that, yeah. Just want to make sure that you had a chance to talk all you want to say.
You do have.
Yes, I was just doing a quick search here on the web in response to your concern. Thank you for sharing your concern with us because,
Okay, because I want to hear, I would love to hear the response to that.
well, I'm a former EPA attorney suing air polluters who violate the Clean Air Act for most of my career, and some of the studies that were done that I don't have right here in front of me, but they were suggesting that lawnmowers, because they don't have the sort of pollution controls that cars have on them, which are much more strict, they emit a lot more than a gasoline car does. So that when people have been looking at ways to reduce general pollution, like smog and particulate matter, or global warming gases like carbon dioxide, they look for lawn equipment in general because not just your particular spot is adding a huge contribution to global warming, but all of the lawn equipment adds up, although they're little bits and pieces of it. That's why Lewis has put their ban, or their phase-out and ban in place, and one would hope that Rehoboth will as well, and other cities would follow our lead. The state of California has been doing this for years. Other states that have had worse air pollution problems have been working on all sources of air pollution. They can figure out what can we do to reduce it more. Cars is certainly one of them, but lawn equipment is a second big hunk of the pie, so that if we can address that as well, that will help address the overall product of the overall production of carbon dioxide for global warming and other polluting gases. Do I have a number for you, like 8 gallons?
So how come we're not including motorcycles in this, Charlie?
Motorcycles ought to be included in it. I'm all in favor of that.
No, whoa. Not according to the Environmental Committee ban.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
We don't have the authority to regulate motorcycles on the local level here.
Or cars. That's federal
Okay, and so
legislation.
let's talk about noise as well. Again, I think that's a very subjective thing. Nobody has gotten ill or died from noise in the city of Rehoboth that I'm aware of. You were throwing this out there as a totally subjective thing. And I don't think that's right. I think you need facts and you need figures to back up this comment about noise as an environmental issue.
We did have
I-
someone
and
testify
again,
last month who
we
had
live on King Charles Avenue where motorcycles race up and down, and we're bothered by that. But yet, this committee is not. I don't understand that.
Well, let me just point out that just because we're not talking about motorcycles and cars doesn't mean we're not concerned, okay? We're just focusing on this issue, and just because those are other problems doesn't mean we shouldn't try to solve this problem. But I'm just curious, what is this piece of equipment that you like to use, and is it a riding mower, or what is it?
My wife and I use a push mower.
A push mower?
We use a Honda mulching mower, if that helps you at all. We live on a corner, so when I edge my grass, I have actually 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 feet, plus a little bit, to use a gas string edger. I don't want to buy an electric one. If you guys force me to go electric, are you going to buy that for me? Are you going to give me a tax credit on what I pay to pay for this new equipment? I'm not doing it.
So, Mr. Hara, can I ask you, if your edger gave up, you know, if you needed to replace it, you're objecting to replacing it with an electric
Yes,
edger?
absolutely. They're not as powerful. I have I have an electric blower. We live in Wilmington. We split our time between here and Rehoboth. I have an electric blower in Wilmington, and it's not as powerful, and it's just as noisy as my gas blower here. Now, sir, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
I'm a retired corporate pilot, and as I've gotten older and we're more aware of climate change, I always say to environmentalists, instead of looking horizontally, look vertically. Are you aware, sir, that what you need to do is research a thing called a SID, Standard Instrument Departure, and a STAR, Standard Terminal Arrival Procedures, because this area sits right underneath departure procedures and corridors for JFK, Teterboro, Newark, LaGuardia, and we're right underneath the arrival for Philadelphia. So at any given moment, we have got multiple aircraft flying over this part of the state, of the country, emitting a carbon footprint that is unbelievable. You really need to research that before you start banning little single-engine, gas-powered landscaping equipment.
I agree with
The
you there.
real carbon footprint that you need to be worried about is vertically, not horizontally.
I agree with you that there's a much larger footprint from an airplane than there is from a lawnmower.
What this group needs to do, if you're that concerned about carbon footprints, is you need to go down to North Shores and protest when the president's in town. Is this committee aware that when he's here, either a KC-135 4-engine jet or a KC-10 3-engine jet is pumping 1,200 to 16 gallons of kerosene an hour into our atmosphere the entire time he's here? Are you aware of that?
Well, it's-
Are you aware of that?
It's apparent that
That
there's
is
a
a
lot of
huge
fuel.
carbon footprint. And before we focus in on lawn equipment, that's where you need to put your focus.
Excuse me, Mr. Hara, I appreciate your arguments, but I think any solution must come both ways, both vertically
Must come-
and
you said-
horizontally. I
Okay.
mean, climate change and our climate problems are huge. They have to be dealt with personally in our own personal lives, but they also need to be dealt with in very large spheres like the government and state and the city. And solutions come both ways, but I can't, and many people having gas-powered lawn equipment. I mean, it's, you add what you do, and I live outside of town, so, I mean, we have a gas-powered mower. And I can hear what you're saying about that, but it's all of us put together is the problem. And yes, we have to deal with both. We're dealing with offshore wind, which is huge. I think airplanes, I think one of the things we're concerned about is traffic and idling with traffic. It's the biggest, our climate is the biggest problem that we have in the world right now. And of course, it has to be dealt with both ways.
So you want to start with lawnmowers. And I noticed that part of your deliberations today, I think, is to broach the subject on how's the homeowner going to replace this equipment?
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to spend $2,000 for new electric equipment unless the city reimburses me,
Yeah. Yeah.
or I get a complete tax credit until that's paid off.
Yeah. Well, I
Is
think
the city
maybe,
prepared to do that?
maybe this phasing is what we're talking about. And maybe it needs to be phased where the city does it first and demonstrates what goes on, and then other steps, you know, as it goes down the line, several different years, where we phase in this electric equipment.
Mr. Har, there's a new law passed on the federal level pertaining to tax credits for less polluting equipment, solar panels, electric cars and stuff. I have not thoroughly reviewed that law. There may very well be in there provisions giving tax credits to people, and I would be glad, for lawn equipment, I'd be glad to research that and come back next month and report to this committee, if you'd like me to.
Mr. Harris, I'd like you to, if you've got any other comments, and then I'd like, I want to talk about the process here on if there's any action, how that happens. And then I'd like us to discuss a little bit more about phasing in on the resident level and actually address some of the things that you've just mentioned.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you have any other comments at this point?
No, I just would love for this committee to come back with again, some hard statistics, some objectivism, not subjectiveness, about noise. What exactly is noise? I'm bothered by motorcycles. Let's ban them. I'm bothered by the renters that come to the property next to us and sit out on the porch and hoop and holler till 2 a.m. That bothers me. So let's ban them. You know, when does it stop? In the military, it's called mission creep. How long is this going to go on? How much more are we going to ban?
We did have somebody talk about the noise last month, and he did say that he was able to measure decibels, and there's no question that the blowers are very louder than most noises, and we do have a noise ordinance here in Rehoboth, so it is something that is not strictly subjective. You know, you can measure how loud things are, and we do have ordinance relating to that.
I think we cannot ban motorcycles, but we could also have a limit on their decibel noise levels so that they would, I mean, I got my motorcycle driver's license as well. You can make more noise or less noise with your motorcycle if you really want to. My house is close to Rehoboth Avenue, and I can hear those guys, wham, you know, if they really want to make a lot of noise with their motorcycle, they can. But if we had enforcement of our noise ordinances, perhaps we could get those people to comply without having to ban the motorcycle itself. Although I'd be glad to see more electric motorcycles, which are even quieter, but.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harris. Anyone else from the public? Would you like to say anything, sir? Yeah, please come up and just state your name and your relationship to the city.
Hello, everyone. Hello. My name is Udi, and
Can you stay closer to the microphone?
My name is Udi, and I work with New Life Landscaping here in Rehoboth.
Okay.
We've been doing this for like 15 years, a little bit more than that. And I'm concerned about this, and we also would like to help about the environment, but we're not sure if all the people in Rehoboth are aware of this change that is that you guys or the city wants to do. And also, we have a lot of properties here in Rehoboth that we cut the grass and blow the leaves and all that stuff. And it take us for cutting some properties like 45 minutes, other 15 minutes, different time like that. And if we move to electrical equipment, it's gonna take us longer. And also the people, we're not sure if they're willing to pay more than what they pay now. Let's say we charge 55, she's not gonna be, she's out of town, so she's okay with it, I think. But then if she was in here, if she will pay 60, and then I will say, well, now we're gonna charge you like 85. I don't know if she's willing to pay that much. And the leaf removal, there is some properties that it take us like 5 or 6 hours, 3 or 4 guys. And then if we move to electrical equipment, it's gonna take us more time. Or using the battery, it takes half hour, I think, to blow, and then we have to recharge again, and we have to wait for that to be charged. And we're not sure if the people is gonna pay for that time that we're gonna be waiting to use the battery again. Or if we use electrical cords, the customers are, we're not sure if they are willing to give us the permission to use the electrical. So we're like concerned about all that stuff. And their pockets are gonna be affected too, because like I said, if we charge 45 an hour, then we'll have to increase the price for an hour or by the job that we do.
Can I ask what's the size of your company? How many people?
Yeah, we have 3 trucks, and we have 3 riding mowers and some push mowers and blowers.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah,
so when you say that you'd have to increase prices, is that to account for your downtime and the increased number of hours you'd need to spend
right.
performing your landscaping?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you an example. Like I said, there is we have different properties here. So there is one that it has like a whole bunch of trees, and like I said, it takes us like between like 5 and 8 hours, 3 or 4 guys. So then if we use the electrical, like he said, it's not like powerful like the gas is. So then the customers will have to pay more. Let's say if we end up with a bill like 800, then they will have to pay more, and I'm not sure if they're
Because of the increased man hours? that
yeah,
you'd need to
yeah,
spend.
yeah,
Okay.
yes. And I don't know if they want to pay that or if they are aware of all that happening. The
So
price.
you're using all gas-powered equipment right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we have just one small blower electrical, but it's just not powerful like the other ones.
All right, thank you. And what was the name of the company you work for?
New Life, it's
New Life, okay.
Life.
Thank you very much for sharing. Thank you. Anyone else? Catherine? No. Okay, thank you.
Well, actually, one comment. This doesn't help you, though. There's a lot of research says that it's not a bad idea to mow your leaves and to leave all that mulch stuff on your gardens. I know a lot of people don't go for that, but there is a lot of research to support that now.
Thank you.
Edward, if I could add that we did have a person who is a fellow who maintains lawns, and he has only electrical equipment. He came and testified. I hire him to do my lawns as well. Don't have a very big lawn, but he testified that his electrical costs are lower than gasoline costs. I have an electric car. The cost of electricity for my electric car is about 1/4 of the cost of the gasoline that I used to burn when I had a gasoline car. So he's saving money by using electricity, and he could pass those savings on to his customers. So perhaps if you were to ask some of your customers, you know, we've got this coming event possibly, about electric equipment. What do you think you would say if I were to plug into your wall socket and use some of your electricity with our corded equipment? They might say yes. I mean, that's what I said to my guy, because I know that the amount of electricity he's going to draw is very small. So it could be that that's a win-win for both parties, since electricity is so much cheaper than gasoline, especially with the price of gasoline these days.
But if you, let's say.
I'm sorry, if you just come up, if you want to say anything else.
Sorry. So if you pay like 800 for whatever work we get done at your place, then are you willing to pay like, let's just say 1,200, like 400 more?
What I was suggesting is that it may be that you'll pay less because the electricity costs less than gasoline costs.
Yeah, but the time doing the job.
Well, there's time to do the job. The fellow who came and testified said that he had his electrical battery being charged while he was using another battery in the equipment over here. And when this battery was used up, he would just swap.
Yeah, we had talked to some of our customers about using their electric, and they say yes, but just like I said, the increase in the price, the longer the time it takes us to get the job done using electrical.
Well, it may be that the passage of a proposal like this means everybody's going to have increased costs, so that you'd be still in a competitive position with your other people in the landscaping business. I would hope that it would result in prices going down for everybody because of the decrease in fuel costs.
One thing I'm not clear on, and from the other landscapers that I've heard here, is does it take longer when you use electric equipment? Is all electric equipment less powerful than gas? Is that just a rule of thumb, or is it vary?
The electrical equipment is less powerful, and yes, it takes more time. Like, let's say, to blow the leaves with a gas blower, but then using electrical, it's not powerful like the gas is. And of course, it takes more time. It's not as powerful. Right.
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. I want to just talk about the process here, and then we can go back to discussion. So if this committee votes to make a recommendation, that is only a recommendation before the mayor and commissioners. The mayor and commissioners are the only body that can enact an ordinance. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear on the process and the avenue that it would go through. And because this would affect so many people within the city, I would very much expect that it would be not a quick decision, but there would be several meetings and given the opportunity for residents to weigh in and make sure that the word is out. And most likely probably even have a public hearing. So I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that process. I open it up for more discussion. I would like for this committee to talk about and address, what if a resident can't afford to, doesn't want to switch? What then? Because I certainly do not expect, we don't even have the resources, but I wouldn't expect that this is going to be a compliance-based thing, that we're out there finding people that aren't complying and things like that. So let's just talk about that aspect of it a little bit.
Well, we could put into this proposal a procedure for those who want to have an exception, so they can apply and ask, saying, I can't afford it, or whatever their problem might be. And somebody in the city, the permitting office or somebody perhaps could be empowered to grant or deny such requests for an exemption. That's something that we do, I think, with other provisions of law. I'm not quite sure whether we have a lot of that in Rehoboth Beach or not. Or we just count on whoever the enforcement officers are to use enforcement discretion to, look the other way when it's not a major infraction.
I think that if we're going to do this thing, I don't know that we want to have everybody asking for it to be waived out or accepted, but if there's not a taste for being punitive, we can look at that aspect of what, we won't put huge fines or anything like that on it, but I haven't thought it all through, but it might be helpful to look at what other municipalities are doing and how's it working in Lewis? Have they really had to go after people? You know, that's something maybe we do want to hear more about.
Well, Lewis, the effective date hasn't even started in
Yeah.
Lewis yet, has it?
I think it's not, I think you're right. I think it's the end of this year is the first phase that it goes in.
I didn't follow those hearings at all. Was there any discussion, Mary, if you know, with people not wanting to comply, and is there a provision in their code for that?
No, there's no exceptions for, you know, waivers or anything like that, but I do know that they did have public hearings and they did hear from people, but I don't know what exactly the comments were. And so, and apparently there's many other municipalities that have banned gas power equipment, and especially I think in more urban areas where it's more difficult to tolerate versus more suburban and rural. So I guess I could try to look on the issue and see what the enforcement scheme is in places that have it. I don't imagine that we want it to be something that is going to tie up a lot of resources with our city to enforce and whatnot, but you know, at the same time, I think we all agree that something needs to be done, so.
I think it might be good to, since we're gonna, you know, do a phased approach on this, that it might be good to collect data during each phase, so that, you know, as the city adopts using electrical equipment, that we, you know, maybe see if we're getting fewer complaints from citizens, whether, you know, they're noticing a change in noise, things like that, but, you know, do some data collection during each phase so that we can then, you know, as phase 2 kicks in, do we need to revisit and decide, you know, are there alterations we need to make? And then by the time we do get to private citizens, we might have a better idea of, you know, the effects that switching to electrical equipment are having on the city.
I agree with you, Joe. I feel that the phasing would be very helpful, and it also would be an example. It's the city could work through the kinks, so to speak, of how long it takes to deal with the batteries and the recharging and taking the data. I think that's data basically in people's responses.
Yeah.
So I think that would be very helpful. I'm for that, for phasing and getting the data. Yeah.
Poll the landscapers, have them come back and say, okay, we're seeing a, you know, a decrease in our costs. We're seeing, you know, whatever their comments may be during that phase.
On enforcement, I would note that most of the time when an environmental provision of some kind is enacted, everybody complies pretty much. There are a few outliers who don't, but Americans and Rehobotheans, I think, would be the same way, that we're law-abiding people. If we're all told that this has been duly and properly enacted, they will go along with it. It's not that much of a change.
I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, and maybe it's not appropriate for this committee to do, but should we ask perhaps Main Street or the Chamber to survey the businesses, or the homeowners association to survey their members?
I really don't think so. I think that you have already indicated that if we ever get a formal proposal out to the mayor and commissioners as a whole, they're going to want to pull the whole thing apart themselves. And, you know, I think at that phase, if the chamber or the Main Street cares to participate, they will. They always, you know, we have a very strong representation of those groups here in Rehoboth, and I don't think we need to concern ourselves of whether they're going to, their views are going to be considered, because they will. and at the next phase. I think if it once it comes out, if we make a proposal, it'll be very publicized that we've recommended this, and then people will have every opportunity to come to the public hearings and state their position.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So what's next step?
Well, I think the last step in the proposal drafting was to choose dates by which the city and commercial and residential people might have to comply. Do we want to say that we want to be parallel to the Lewis compliance dates, so it would not be confusing with Lewis, so that we would adopt their same dates, or should we move them all back a couple of years?
I think at the last meeting, I think we agreed it would be no sooner than the city coming into compliance by 2023, or at the end of, so December 31st, 2023. Contractors would be December 2024, and residents 2025. I think we agreed that it would be no sooner than those dates.
And we have even later dates for larger equipment. So 2027 for large equipment such as riding mowers for the city, 2028 for contractors, and 2029 for residents for large equipment.
And I think that was the caveat there, would be we would have to monitor and make sure that the technology has caught up where those are feasible by those dates.
Right. Subject to change.
Sounds reasonable to me. Those are good compliance dates.
All right, so I think we've got a path forward, and I suspect that we'll have something in final form to potentially vote on at the next meeting.
Okay.
I'm looking at you because I'm assuming you're gonna, Mary, you'll put it in final
All right,
adoption
I'll
form?
take a crack at it.
Okay. And next on the agenda is any further discussion on the pollinator gardens.
Thank you for your
Thank
comments.
you for coming and commenting. Next on the agenda is collaboration with other city committees and community organizations for education related to pollinator gardens. And I did want to bring up that the Tree and Green Infrastructure Committee is doing a presentation. It's called Less Lawn,
Yeah, the 28th, I believe.
October 27th at 10 a.m. Less lawn, more native. Presentation on lawn alternatives. So that is October 27th at 10 a.m. in this room. And it will be put on by a University of Delaware, Dr. Susan Barton. With that, do we have any other updates? Charlie, I think what we discussed the last time is that we would put together sort of a recommendation package for the city on how to best educate and implement some of these things, as well as resources for the website and things like that. Is that where
On
we?
the pollinator gardens
Yes,
topic specifically? Well, yeah, I think those are good things to do. Education is, I think, the major thrust of the pollinator garden proposal. The city, of course, as usual, should be leading. That's what leadership is all about. And we should be getting some pilot programs started, perhaps, but likewise coordinating with other civic groups, like the Lawn Be Gone people or others who have done pollinator gardens, what works, what doesn't work, that sort of thing, because you know, it's a continuing problem. Their extinction is looming for many of these small creatures who are small, but they are a backbone of the economy.
One of the things I had always hoped for when this issue came up was that the city itself would have either a policy or some kind of requirement that in all the landscaping work that the city itself does, that they will always be geared towards native plants. And I know Newcastle County has done that, the state of Delaware has done that, and the city seems to be moving in that direction, and I will say that, you know, I see that going on, and that's good, but maybe we can have a more formalized policy for the city to use. You know, and Liz said, you know, it's not necessarily pollinators, but just the use of native plants, which are better adapted to the environment here and don't require as much maintenance and so forth, is a good approach, so.
So, oh, go ahead. Eric.
Yeah, I think they do have, and I think when we discussed that last, we just kind of, I ride by now at State Street and see that one there, and I take a look at it all the time, and you don't know that it's there. So I think one of the comments was for, you know, to say, hey, this is, you know, communication out when you ride by and you look at it. They don't look that pretty, you're right, but they're natural. So I think that kind of, everybody rides State Street right there at that corner, and I see it all the time now, and just maybe, once again, a little education and maybe come up with a nice sign and say, hey, you know, to promote that, to start that, right? That the city is starting that, and that we are moving in that direction, so.
Yeah, and
I just,
the other thing is, and I don't know what, I've never seen like a municipality do this, but I don't see why they can't, the National Wildlife Federation being implemented by the Delaware Nature Society will provide a sign that says certified habitat,
that's, yeah,
and, you know.
that's good stuff.
Yeah, we could work on something like that.
So I think to move this forward, we should probably have a document that kind of gives an overview of it, a policy recommendation that we're making. I would say it's just a policy, not something that we would put in ordinance form. Recommendations on resources that the city can put on its website. A recommendation that we have all of our pollinator gardens certified by the National Wildlife, and that be communicated with the signs in those areas, so people walking by just don't think, oh, why aren't they upkeeping their gardens and public space? It's like that for a reason. People need to know that. And then, Charlie, if there's other areas that you want to identify in the city that could be pilot programs on city property, maybe there's a few areas that we can identify that we then encourage the city to either make it into a pollinator garden or work with Rehoboth and Bloom or some other community organization to do that in certain areas.
Well, I have put together a written proposal, most recently updated in August. I'd be glad to share that with other members of our committee to see if they have additional resources or places to send people that they would want to edit this. I don't know if that's appropriate to have edits going on outside of this committee meeting or not, but.
It's perfectly fine if you're soliciting feedback and it's coming to you and you're editing, that's perfectly fine. The document will then be made public in this meeting. But I think we have to be very clear on what we're recommending to the city, and these are resources that should be put on the website. These are areas that should be turned into pollinator gardens in the city, et cetera. And so if we can just solidify something to bring back here with everything we want to accomplish, I think that's the best way to move forward.
I'll send that around to everyone for their comments and try to beef it up a little bit myself with the thoughts that you had, Commissioner.
Any other comments on this topic? Okay, well, with that, we are out of time. So I'm going to open up for any future agenda items or committee member comments in general.
I would really like for us to deal with this Senate Bill 134, which has to do with straws, where what we did failed. And I think we need some closure to that.
Yep.
And, I would like for us to just move that the commission accept the the Senate bill
Okay.
and do this, that we lead as the city of Rehoboth.
And we did have that on the agenda at the last, I just removed some of the last items because I expected that the wind discussion would take up
Could we
most of
just
this.
move that the city just accept, that the city accept the,
Not without it being on the agenda. So
Discussion, yeah.
Okay.
I will put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
At the last meeting, you talked about us having a liaison for each organization or committees. Do you want us to send?
Send
our
it,
Send them to you?
yeah, if you could send them to me, and then we'll present that at the next meeting. So I think the Tree and Green Infrastructure Committee, Rehoboth in Bloom, I think the Chamber of Commerce. I'll try to think of some other organizations, but yeah, I think it would be great to have a liaison up to each of those. Any other comments?
Yeah, as far as at the recycling, I think at the last meeting, I took home some homework. And so I did reach out to a couple of the townships or beaches areas and kind of talked with their folks. So I have some information to share about recycling.
I'll make sure that's
and
on the agenda
successes.
for our next
Thanks,
meeting.
Edward. Yeah.
All right, with that, meeting adjourned at 12:02.
Well done, team.
Thank you,
All right, well done.
everyone.
Great meeting, guys.